Chapter 7 and 8 of Book 12 of Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martina Hutchins of Berkeley, California. Les Misérables, Volume 4, by Victor Hugo, translated by Isabel, Florence, HAPGOOD. Book 12, Corinth, Chapter 7. The man recruited in the Rue des Billettes. Night was fully come, nothing made its appearance. All that they heard was confused noises, and at intervals fusillades. But these were rare, badly sustained, and distant. This respite, which was thus prolonged, was a sign that the government was taking its time and collecting its forces. These 50 men were waiting for 60,000. And Horace felt attacked by that impatience which seizes on strong souls on the threshold of redoubtable events. He went in search of Gavroche, who had set to making cartridges in the tap-room, by the dubious light of 2 candles placed on the counter by way of precaution, on account of the powder which was scattered on the tables. These 2 candles cast no gleam outside. The insurgents had, moreover, taken pains not to have any light in the upper stories. Gavroche was deeply preoccupied at the moment, but not precisely with his cartridges. The man of the Rue des Billettes had just entered the tap-room, and had seated himself at the table which was the least lighted. A musket of large model had fallen into his share, and he held it between his legs. Gavroche, who had been, up to that moment, distracted by 100 amusing things, had not even seen this man. When he entered, Gavroche followed him mechanically with his eyes, admiring his gun. Then, all at once, when the man was seated, the street urchin sprang to his feet. Anyone who had spied upon that man up to that moment would have seen that he was observing everything in the barricade and in the band of insurgents with singular attention. But from the moment when he had entered this room he had fallen into a sort of brown study, and no longer seemed to see anything that was going on. The gamin approached this pensive personage and began to step around him on tiptoe, as one walks in the vicinity of a person whom one is afraid of waking. At the same time, over his childish countenance, which was at once so impudent and so serious, so giddy and so profound, so gay and so heartbreaking, passed all those grimaces of an old man which signify, "Ah, bah! Impossible! My sight is bad. I am dreaming. Can this be? No, it is not. But yes! Why, no!" etc. Gavroche balanced on his heels, clenched both fists in his pockets, moved his neck around like a bird, expended in a gigantic pout all the sagacity of his lower lip. He was astounded, uncertain, incredulous, convinced, dazzled. He had the mien of the chief of the eunuchs in the slave mart, discovering a Venus among the blowsy females, and the air of an amateur recognizing a Raphael in a heap of daubs. His whole being was at work, the instinct which scents out and the intelligence which combines. It was evident that a great event had happened in Gavroche's life. It was at the most intense point of this preoccupation that Enjolras accosted him. "You are small," said Enjolras. "You will not be seen. Go out of the barricade, slip along close to the houses, skirmish about a bit in the streets, and come back and tell me what is going on." Gavroche raised himself on his haunches. "So the little chaps are good for something. That's very lucky. I'll go. In the meanwhile, trust to the little fellows, and distrust the big ones." And Gavroche, raising his head and lowering his voice, added, as he indicated the man of the Rue des Billettes, "Do you see that big fellow there?" "Well?" "He's a police spy." "Are you sure of it?" "It isn't 2 weeks since he pulled me off the cornice of the Port Royal, where I was taking the air, by my ear." Enjolras hastily quitted the urchin, and murmured a few words in a very low tone to a longshoreman from the wine docks who chanced to be at hand. The man left the room and returned almost immediately, accompanied by 3 others. The 4 men, 4 porters, with broad shoulders, went and placed themselves, without doing anything to attract his attention, behind the table on which the man of the Rue des Billettes was leaning with his elbows. They were evidently ready to hurl themselves upon him. When Enjolras approached the man and demanded of him, "Who are you?" At this abrupt query the man started. He plunged his gaze deep into Enjolras' clear eyes, and appeared to grasp the latter's meaning. He smiled with a smile than which nothing was more disdainful, more energetic, and more resolute could be seen in the world, and replied with haughty gravity, "I see what it is. Well, yes. You are a police spy. I am an agent of the authorities. And your name?" "Javert." Enjolras made a sign to the 4 men. In the twinkling of an eye, before Javert had time to turn round, he was collared, thrown down, pinioned, and searched. They found on him a little round card, pasted between 2 pieces of glass, and bearing on one side the arms of France engraved, and with this motto, "Supervision and Vigilance," and on the other this note, "Javert, Inspector of Police, aged 52," and the signature of the prefect of police of that day, Monsieur Gisquet. Besides this, he had his watch and his purse, which contained several gold pieces. They left him his purse and his watch. Under the watch, at the bottom of his fob, they felt and seized a paper in an envelope, which Enjolras unfolded, and on which he read these 5 lines, written in the very hand of the prefect of police: "As soon as his political mission is accomplished, Inspector Javert will make sure, by special supervision, whether it is true that the malefactors have instituted intrigues on the right bank of the Seine near the Jena bridge." The search ended. They lifted Javert to his feet, bound his arms behind his back, and fastened him to that celebrated post in the middle of the room which had formerly given the wine shop its name. Gavroche, who had looked on at the whole of this scene, and had approved of everything, with a silent toss of his head, stepped up to Javert and said to him, "It's the mouse who has caught the cat." All this was so rapidly executed that it was all over when those about the wine shop noticed it. Javert had not uttered a single cry. At the sight of Javert bound to the post, Courfeyrac, Bossuet, Joly, Combeferre, and the man scattered over the 2 barricades came running up. Javert, with his back to the post, and so surrounded with ropes that he could not make a movement, raised his head with the intrepid serenity of the man who has never lied. "He is a police spy," said Enjolras, and turning to Javert, "You will be shot 10 minutes before the barricade is taken." Javert replied in his most imperious tone, "Why not at once?" "We are saving our powder." "Then finish the business with a blow of a knife." "Spy," said the handsome Enjolras, "we are judges and not assassins." Then he called Gavroche. "Here you, go about your business. Do what I told you." "I'm going," cried Gavroche. And halting as he was on the point of setting out, "By the way, you will give me his gun?" And he added, "I leave you the musician, but I want the clarinet." The gamin made the military salute, and passed gaily through the opening in the large barricade. Chapter 8. Many interrogation points with regard to a certain Le Cabuc, whose name may not have been Le Cabuc. The tragic picture which we have undertaken would not be complete. The reader would not see those grand moments of social birth pangs in a revolutionary birth, which contain convulsion mingled with effort, in their exact and real relief, were we to omit, in the sketch here outlined, an incident full of epic and savage horror, which occurred almost immediately after Gavroche's departure. Mobs, as the reader knows, are like a snowball. and collect as they roll along, a throng of tumultuous men. These men do not ask each other whence they come. Among the passers-by, who had joined the rabble led by Enjolras, Combeferre, and Courfeyrac, there had been a person wearing the jacket of a street porter, which was very threadbare on the shoulders, who gesticulated and vociferated, and who had the look of a drunken savage. This man, whose name or nickname was Le Cabuc, and who was, moreover, an utter stranger to those who pretended to know him, was very drunk, or assumed the appearance of being so, and had seated himself, with several others, at a table which they had dragged outside the wine-shop. This Cabuc, while making those who vied with him drunk, seemed to be examining with a thoughtful air the large house at the extremity of the barricade, whose 5 stories commanded the whole street and faced the Rue Saint-Denis. All at once he exclaimed, "Do you know, comrades, it is from that house yonder that we must fire. When we are at the windows, the deuce is in it if anyone can advance into the street." "Yes, but the house is closed," said one of the drinkers. "Let us knock." "They will not open." "Let us break in the door." Le Cabuc runs to the door, which had a very massive knocker, and knocks. The door opens not. He strikes a second blow. No one answers. A third stroke. The same silence. "Is there anyone here?" shouts Cabuc. Nothing stirs. Then he seizes a gun and begins to batter the door with the butt end. It was an ancient alley door, low, vaulted, narrow, solid, entirely of oak, lined on the outside with a sheet of iron and iron stays, a genuine prison postern. The blows from the butt end of the gun made the house tremble, but did not shake the door. Nevertheless, it is probable that the inhabitants were disturbed, for a tiny square window was finally seen to open on the 3rd story, and at this aperture appeared the reverend and terrified face of a gray-haired old man who was the porter and who held a candle. The man who was knocking paused. "Gentlemen," said the porter, "what do you want?" "Open," said Cabuc. "That cannot be, gentlemen." "Open nevertheless." "Impossible, gentlemen." Le Cabuc took his gun and aimed at the porter, but as he was below, and as it was very dark, the porter did not see him. "Will you open, yes or no?" "No, gentlemen." "Do you say no?" "I say no, my good—" The porter did not finish. The shot was fired. The ball entered under his chin and came out at the nape of the neck after transversing the jugular vein. The old man fell back without a sigh. The candle fell and was extinguished, and nothing more was to be seen except a motionless head lying on the sill of the small window, and a little whitish smoke which floated off towards the roof. "There!" said Le Cabuc, dropping the butt end of his gun on the pavement. He had hardly uttered this word when he felt a hand laid on his shoulder with the weight of an eagle's talon, and he heard a voice saying to him, "On your knees." The murderer turned round and saw before him Enjolras' cold, white face. Enjolras held a pistol in his hand. He had hastened up at the sound of the discharge. He had seized Cabuc's collar, blouse, shirt, and suspender with his left hand. "On your knees," he repeated. And, with an imperious motion, the frail young man of 20 years bent the thick-set and sturdy porter like a reed, and brought him to his knees in the mire. Le Cabuc attempted to resist, but he seemed to have been seized by a superhuman hand. Enjolras, pale, with bare neck and dishevelled hair, and his woman's face, had about him at that moment something of the antique Themis. His dilated nostrils, his downcast eyes, gave to his implacable Greek profile that expression of wrath and that expression of chastity which, as the ancient world viewed the matter, befit justice. The whole barricade hastened up. Then all ranged themselves in a circle at a distance, feeling that it was impossible to utter a word in the presence of the thing which they were about to behold. Le Cabuc, vanquished, no longer tried to struggle, and trembled in every limb. Enjolras released him and drew out his watch. "Collect yourself," said he. "Think or pray. You have 1 minute." "Mercy!" murmured the murderer. Then he dropped his head and stammered a few inarticulate oaths. Enjolras never took his eyes off him. He allowed a minute to pass. Then he replaced his watch in his fob. That done, he grasped Le Cabuc by the hair, as the latter coiled himself into a ball at his knees and shrieked, and placed the muzzle of the pistol to his ear. Many of those intrepid men who had so tranquilly entered upon the most terrible of adventures turned aside their heads. An explosion was heard. The assassin fell to the pavement, face downwards. Enjolras straightened himself up, and cast a convinced and severe glance around him. Then he spurned the corpse with his foot and said, "Throw that outside." 3 men raised the body of the unhappy wretch, which was still agitated by the last mechanical convulsions of the life that had fled, and flung it over the little barricade of the Rue Mondétour. Enjolras was thoughtful. It was impossible to say what grandiose shadows slowly spread over his redoubtable serenity. All at once he raised his voice. A silence fell upon them. "Citizens," said Enjolras, "what that man did was frightful. What I have done is horrible. He killed, therefore I killed him. I had to do it, because insurrection must have its discipline. Assassination is even more of a crime here than elsewhere. We are under the eyes of the Revolution. We are the priests of the Republic. We are the victims of duty, and must not be possible to slander our combat. I have, therefore, tried that man and condemned him to death. As for myself, constrained as I am to do what I have done, and yet abhorring it, I have judged myself also, and you shall soon see to what I have condemned myself." Those who listened to him shuddered. "We will share thy fate," cried Combeferre. "So be it," replied Enjolras. "One word more. In executing this man I have obeyed necessity, but necessity is a monster of the old world. Necessity's name is fatality. Now the law of progress is, that monsters shall disappear before the angels, and that fatality shall vanish before fraternity. It is a bad moment to pronounce the word love. No matter, I do pronounce it, and I glorify it. Love, the future is thine. Death, I make use of thee, but I hate thee. Citizens, in the future there will be neither darkness nor thunderbolts, neither ferocious ignorance nor bloody retaliation. As there will be no more Satan, there will be no more Michael. In the future no one will kill anyone else. The earth will beam with radiance. The human race will love. The day will come, citizens, when all will be conquered, harmony, light, joy, and life. It will come, and it is in order that it may come that we are about to die." Enjolras ceased. His virgin lips closed, and he remained for some time standing on the spot where he had shed blood, in marble immobility. His staring eye caused those around him to speak in low tones. Jean Prouvaire and Combeferre pressed each other's hands silently, and, leaning against each other in an angle of the barricade, they watched, with an admiration in which there was some compassion, that grave young man, executioner and priest, composed of light, like crystal, and also of rock. Let us say at once that later on, after the action, when the bodies were taken to the morgue and searched, a police agent's card was found on Le Cabuc. The author of this book had in his hands in 1848 the special report on this subject made to the prefect of police in 1832. We will add that if we are to believe a tradition of the police, which is strange but probably well-founded, le cabuc was claquesous. The fact is that dating from the death of le cabuc there was no longer any question of claquesous. Claquesous had nowhere left any trace of his disappearance. He would seem to have amalgamated himself with the invisible. His life had been all shadows. His end was night. The whole insurgent group was still under the influence of the emotion of that tragic case which had been so quickly tried and so quickly terminated, when Courfeyrac again beheld on the barricade the small young man who had inquired of him that morning for Marius. This lad, who had a bold and reckless air, had come by night to join the insurgents. End of Book 12, Chapter 8. End of Book 12, Corinth. Recording by Martina Hutchins in Berkeley, California.